Broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, thank you for joining us for this session, Technical Proposals Putting the 2021 IECC on a Glide Path to Efficiency. I am Connie Empress, Communications Manager here at New Buildings Institute. Before we begin, I have a couple of housekeeping things to tell you about. First, you are muted and we cannot hear you. This helps keep the background noise down so that everyone can better hear the speakers. I want to direct you to the dashboard that you should be able to see on the right-hand side of your screen. If you are having technical difficulties and cannot see the slides or hear our speakers, you can use the question pane in this dashboard to let us know, and we will help you as we go. Please ask questions in this question pane as they come up. We will take a few questions at the end of the presentation. At the end of the webinar session, you will be given the opportunity to take a short survey. You will receive a follow-up email tomorrow with links to the recording and slides for this presentation. Today's panel will be introduced by NBI's Amy Cortez. Amy, I'll pass it over to you.
Thanks, Connie. Welcome, everyone. New Buildings Institute is a national nonprofit that works to improve energy performance in commercial and residential buildings, and we're thrilled to host y'all today to learn a little bit more about these technical proposals for the 2021 IECC. I'd like to introduce today's panel, which consists of Bill Fay, Eric Lacey, and Eric Makala. Bill Fay has led the Energy Efficiency Codes Coalition since 2007. IECC has united a unique support base to advance the development and adoption of building energy codes that put America on a glide path of dynamic building efficiency gains. IECC has helped boost the residential and commercial building efficiency of America's Model Energy Code, the IECC, and has worked with local and state jurisdictions to support its adoption. Eric Lacey is the chairman of the Responsible Energy Codes Alliance, a broad coalition of energy efficiency professionals, regional organizations, product and equipment manufacturers, trade associations, and environmental organizations that promote the adoption and implementation of the IECC nationwide. In Eric's 13 years as chairman, he's been involved in the development of the IECC in the ICC codes development process and has been involved in code adoption efforts around the country. Eric Lacey serves as member of IECC's technical committee, which researches and develops the IECC's code change proposals. Eric Makala is Associate Director of Codes and Policy here at New Buildings Institute. Eric has over 30 years of building energy codes expertise throughout the United States as well as abroad. He supports NBI's broader engagement in code development with an emphasis on stretch codes and multifamily code adoption. So with those brief introductions, I'm going to pass this off to Bill Fay to start things off.
Well, thank you for having me on this webinar. I think that you gave a great description about Energy Efficient Codes Coalition. You know, we're kind of an unlikely coalition. It's a lot of people that don't speak to one another when they pass in the halls. But they all share a common view that America's Model Energy Code is vital and needs to be improved every code cycle. In fact, we were formed after 20 years of very meager improvements in the IECC, and we include groups like, we're one of the few groups that has low-income housing advocates, consumer groups, manufacturers, the environmental community, labor, state energy offices, of course, MPI, and a lot of the efficiency advocates from around the country. So let's go to our next slide, because what I want to talk about is the uniqueness of the IECC. And let me see if I can do that. Let me move back. There are 15 I codes, and most of those, 14 of those 15 prevent our buildings from bad things from happening to our buildings. And it usually focuses on individual homes, the structure the structural integrity, the fire worthiness, and the safety design of individual homes. The impacts of those cannot be overstated, I don't think, because our home safety and how they perform in disaster situations and fire worthiness are critical, but they're largely confined to an individual home or just in the area of our home. In contrast, the IECC actually regulates buildings to positively influence not only our own individual situation, but also local, national, and international public policies. By reducing the amount of money that we pay to utilities pretty sizably, the IECC puts a lot of money in our wallets, makes us more economically sound. An energy efficient home performs especially well during peak load times. And so those very cold temperatures we're feeling around the country now, if you're in an IECC and a very energy efficient home, it's going to be better for you. In addition to that, but low-income housing advocates have found that the leading reason for foreclosure outside of losing your job is inability to pay your energy bills. So they're very active in our group and very supportive of the efficiency changes that we've been proposing. In addition to that, for a locality, the fact that the efficient buildings use less energy during those peak load times obviously stabilizes that grid and it stabilizes those costs. And it also has an impact on whether or not when we need to have new power plants. The current IECCs, the improvements that we've seen there have had a profound impact on the need for new power plants and preventing those power plants. Nationally, what really started the effort, of course, was the energy crises of the last century. And I think that was one of the driving forces for Congress getting involved in endorsing the IECC and ASHRAE 90.1 and urging their improvement every single code cycle. And then in this century, there's been a lot of attention on the Paris Climate Accords and on climate. And it turns out that those things that put more money in our wallets, give us more comfortable homes, and stabilize our energy bills, also reduce carbon from the largest source of carbon emissions in the United States, and that's our buildings. Lastly, it is the only I code of the 15 that pays for itself. Policymakers have been noticing this for a long time, and I just want to cite a few examples of it. There are a lot of them, but I remember the Duke Energy CEO saying that improvements in building energy efficiency and appliance standards have broken the traditional connection between economic growth and electricity demand. Now that's significant because for many, many decades, we've always felt that if we had a growing economy, we had to have more electricity generation and more energy use. And in fact, today that's not true. And Lynn Good said that that traditional link has been broken by better building energy efficiency. In addition to that, the U.S. Conference of Mayors has taken a strong leadership role. They recently told the ICC Board of Directors at a meeting last fall that they are counting on and they want to rely on the IECC as their document to help them deliver the efficiency gains that will help us achieve our energy and climate goals. And they pointed out that they were disappointed that the last two code cycles we didn't see gains in the residential sector and very small gains in the commercial sector. We need to do better than that. And the U.S. Conference of Mayors has voted numerous times to try to improve, support the adoption of a stronger IECC, the 2009, 2012, 2015, and the 2018. But last year, they actually put together two top priorities of mayors across the nation. The first priority is, of course, building energy efficiency through those resolutions. But in addition to that, they've been leaders in climate mitigation as well. And so they pointed out that McKinsey and company, when they did a report for the Climate 40 cities around the world, pointed out that building efficiency is the most impactful and cost-effective step that a jurisdiction can make in order to reduce its carbon emissions and to meet the Paris Accord targets by 2030. Now, I think this is interesting because one of the things that I love about the IECC and about the I-codes is the fact that they're developed by local officials and state officials, and I think that's what gives them their validity, is the fact that they are developed by governmental officials from around the country. But at the same time, that's true. I've always called the IECC America's most public secret. We have a very public process to adopt the IECC, and only governmental officials can actually vote to do it. But of the over 100,000 potential governmental member voting representatives, fewer than 500 actually voted on the last IECC update, and that was for the 2018 IECC. So we now have a deadline that's approaching. The governmental memberships have to be paid by March 23rd in order to ensure voting eligibility. And I'm sorry, March 29th, not March 23rd. And in fact, we have a process that's already begun with the introduction of several hundred proposals to make the IECC stronger. I guess some of them may be to roll back efficiency, which we'll oppose. But the fact is we have a very, very vibrant process that's just about to get underway. By the 29th of March, communities have to identify, their governmental memberships and designate their primary representatives. By the 24th of September, they have to submit their roster of their voting representatives, 4, 8, or 12 for each governmental member. And then, of course, in November, right now, slated for the 13th to the 27th of November, but it's going to change, is the 2-week voting window where governmental member voting representatives can go online through CDP Access and get involved. Now, those are very small steps. They're easy steps. They're inexpensive steps that a jurisdiction can take with big results. Especially with the proposals you're about to hear in a few minutes, but they can also take moderate steps that are going to make a difference. They can get involved in both the committee action hearings that are going to be in Albuquerque from April 23rd to May 8th, and then later on the public comment hearings in Las Vegas that will take place. So what you're about to hear is some very transformative proposals. We are very seriously taking the U.S. Conference of Mayors directive that they want the IECC to be put on, and the 2021 IECC and future IECCs to be put on a glide path of steady progress towards net zero construction in America. And right now, the resolution that they passed last year said that let's do this by 2050. You're going to see here in these proposals that Eric's going to start out, that the two Erics are going to present. You're going to hear some very, very excellent ideas that are going to make the IECC, transform the IECC not only into a more efficient code for use by jurisdictions, but also one that's going to have some more flexibility once a certain level of improvements have been made. I think it's going to be scalable for jurisdictions that want to go more quickly than the levels that are set in the IECC. And most significantly, towards the end, the thing you're going to see for communities is a guidance document, an appendix, if you will, that the American Institute of Architects and that New Buildings Institute have put together for commercial and residential buildings, respectively. And so, with that, I want to turn it over to Eric Lacey at the Responsible Energy Codes Alliance to talk about the EECC proposals for the 2021 IECC.
Well, thank you, Bill. the intro, and we're lucky to have you at EECC. As Bill mentioned, I serve on the technical committee of the Energy Efficient Codes Coalition and try to provide the perspective from the standpoint of what's being adopted and considered out at the state level. And so it's my job to walk through some of the nitty-gritty of the EECC proposals that you're going to be seeing in the monograph, which was just published last night. First, I want to say three things about the kind of the flagship of the Energy Efficient Codes Coalition, and that is our FlexPoints proposal. This is a proposal that we've put out in one form or another the last couple of cycles. We've taken the feedback that we've received from the committee and from others, and we've refined this and perfected it, and we're actually very proud of it. The basics of FlexPoints is that there is clearly a need out there at the state level and the city level for an energy code that goes beyond the current level of efficiency. We've had kind of a slowdown in the improvement in overall efficiency in the IECC in the last 2 cycles. So FlexPoints would bring about a 5% energy efficiency improvement, and it does this by adopting a table, and you find your climate zone in the table and pick out a measure or more than one measure that would get you up to 5 points, and each point is roughly a 1% energy efficiency improvement. This is an approach that's been very successful in Washington and Oregon, in other places, and we've seen these kind of package-based or points-based compliance paths or options being implemented in other places. And so we're trying to follow this model, and we think it's a good one, towards getting 5% energy efficiency. The second point is that we think this provides maximum efficiency or maximum flexibility for builders. These measures that have been selected are cost effective, they are feasible in the climate zones in which they apply, and we think that it will give builders maximum amount of freedom to find the right combination of components that will bring the 5% improvement. The third point I would make is that the proposal addresses something that's been a concern of ours for a while, and that is there are some code proponents and pieces of equipment and other things that are very difficult to regulate within the context of the code. Oftentimes the efficiency of a product will be regulated by the federal government, and states aren't allowed to put more stringent requirements on them, and so on. So we feel like the FlexPoints proposal strikes a good balance between pushing for more energy efficiency as well as providing maximum flexibility. And let me just note the code change number. It is RE206. For those of you that download the monograph from IECC and want to look it up, the table's too long to put on one slide, but that's proposal RE206, and it's on page something thousand of the monograph. Now, as Bill said, we tried to design this to be scalable so that if a jurisdiction wants to incorporate a 10% efficiency improvement or a 7% or whatever, it's very easy to scale it. We also tried to craft it in a way so that it could be so that it could work around other proposals. If there's an improvement elsewhere in the code, it won't necessarily impact the FlexPoints. You can go ahead and adopt it as it's published. Finally, for those jurisdictions that are enforced in the 2012 or 2015 or 2018 IECC, it would be very easy to take the FlexPoints and put the whole thing into your code to get that 5% boost, even if your jurisdiction is not moving forward with a code update anytime soon. Well, let me talk about some of the other proposals, and I've combined some of these into single slides just to give kind of a sense of the combined impact of some of the improvements, and I've color-coded them. The green cells in these tables show improvements, and again, there are, I think, 4 proposals here that are represented, but I put them all into one table. This is the prescriptive insulation requirements for the IECC, and this is just the R value table. Obviously, we put in U-factor improvements as well. But these are all values that we found to be cost-effective and that are feasible out there in the states, and they'll bring about a substantial improvement in energy efficiency. And so these are the insulation improvements. The fenestration improvements have done the same thing here, and again, this represents 2 or 3 proposals. The U factors improve in climate zones 2 through 4. We've also proposed adding a footnote that was very popular in the 2018 update, but it fell short by just a few votes in the public comment voting process. And that footnote would give a little bit of a break on U factor for homes that are installing for windows that are installed in homes above 4,000 feet or in regions where windborne debris protection is required. We're also proposing a moderate SHGC 0.40 in climate zone 5, which we think most windows probably already meet anyway. Let's move on to the energy rating index. You might recognize the numbers that EECC is proposing for the ERI. These are the numbers that were in the 2015 IECC, and there are actually a number of states that adopted the 2015 IECC numbers. Those numbers increased in 2018 as part of kind of a large compromise that was made and some other changes that were made to the code. We think that they are reasonable numbers and cost effective, and based on our experience in these states that have adopted these numbers, we think it's reasonable to come back down to the low 50s for the energy rating index targets. We've also proposed a number of other ERI path improvements. We've strengthened some of the backstop provisions to make sure that as trade-offs are taking place in the energy rating index and in the performance path, that not too much efficiency is traded away. We've also done a significant amount of language cleanup in the ERI and elsewhere in the code. And on that, I'm gonna pause. Actually, hold on. Let me run through just a few more residential proposals, and then I'm going to ask Eric Makala to describe some residential proposals that NBI has put in. Just a quick summary of some other EECC residential proposals that you can find in the ICC monograph. There are a number of prescriptive loopholes that have, some of which were in versions of the code from 10 or 20 years ago. That have just kind of lingered on the books, so to speak, and we don't think there's any need for them anymore. And so there are a few cases where we've gone around and eliminated these efficiency loopholes. We've also taken a fresh look at duct testing and tightness. Right now, you can trade duct tightness up to kind of unsustainable levels, and if you're incorporating other efficiency measures into the home, and if your home is anything like mine, you find that the conditioned air never gets to the room that you want it to. And so we've put a provision in that would put a maximum amount of duct leakage that would apply it to any home. Still allow quite a bit of trade-off between duct tightness and other efficiency measures, but we felt like it was important to make sure that the conditioned air got to the intended place in the home. We've also proposed adding a test even for ducts that are located inside conditioned space. When we looked at DOE field study data, we found that in many cases where homes were exempt from duct tests because they had located all the ducts inside conditioned space, the duct leakage levels were substantial and far too high, and I suspect that the occupants of those homes will probably be very unhappy with how little conditioned air is actually getting out to their bedrooms. We've also added and improved some of the trade-off backstops in the code. Again, as more and more things are being traded and the efficiencies being traded among all the components in the home, you want to make sure that things aren't traded to efficiency levels that are below what a homeowner would expect in a new home. EECC has also branched out this cycle and incorporated some new concepts. One of those is we put forward provisions for electric vehicle readiness. And so as I've read through the monograph, EECC is not the only one. This is a kind of a popular provision, but it's something that's somewhat new to the IECC. There are a number of other proposals, but those are some of the key proposals that that will bring a lot of energy savings and that we think have been thought through and will be cost effective and feasible. So with that, I'm going to hand things over to Eric Makala to talk about some NBI proposals that would affect the residential IECC. Eric?
Thanks, Eric. If you can, I think you still have control. Thank you. The one proposal I wanted to talk about was our zero energy appendix that we co-wrote with on the Natural Resource Defense Council. And the focus on this is an appendix that gives the jurisdiction the option of adopting this. They don't have to, it won't become mandatory unless they want to bring it in. Jurisdictions right now are looking for advancing codes, maybe above and beyond what's currently in the 2018 or 2021 when that IECC, when that comes out. So this will give them an alternative to be able to say, if you want to build ZE, here is a codified method of doing it. And this is based on the Energy Rating Index approach. The first column, the second column, actually, the Energy Rating Index, not including on-site power, is the ERI number you have to hit before you install renewables on the building. And these values are actually from ASHRAE 90.2. They've been shown to be both cost-effective and buildable, which is a key important aspect on this to make sure that what we're putting in here is a realistic proposal. And then the last column, the Energy Rating Index, including on-site power, will always be 0. So you're always trying to get to 0 on this. If you can go to the next slide, Eric. Yeah. So the on-site, we've done, and New Buildings Institute did quite a bit of analysis to look at HERS ratings throughout the U.S. and try to correlate those with energy use in buildings and energy use indexes in buildings. And so we've done quite a bit of analysis and looking at data. We finally settled on the ASHRAE 90.2 values just because it made the most sense. And again, they were shown to be both cost-effective and buildable. Which is again kind of a key critical piece on here. So anyway, that was the only one I wanted to talk about for residential.
All right, thank you, Eric. And just in summary, I'm going to put up some our email addresses and the EECC website. As I mentioned, there are several more EECC proposals, and what I showed on the screen was obviously not the full text of the proposals or the supporting material. But if you have any questions about these, you can email Bill or me or get more information from the EECC website. So with that, I will hand things back over to you, Eric Makala, and you can tell us about the commercial proposals.
Thank you. Let me go back up. So I'm Eric Makala, the Associate Director for Codes and Policies here at New Buildings Institute, as Amy indicated earlier today. My focus has been a lot on the commercial, developing code change proposals for the commercial provisions of the IECC, and also some of the residential too, but I'm going to be talking about the commercial proposals that we submitted. We have our philosophy here at NBI is really focused on collaboration with industry members. It's important to make sure that what we're presenting are actually viable, they can be built, they save energy, they're not going to cause problems to the jurisdiction who are trying to enforce this. So we look at a lot of this when we actually develop code change proposals. We've also developed guides for going 20% above code, 40% above code, and a lot of the provisions that I'm going to be that we're proposing into the IECC have been vetted by cities and states. They're currently, under, for example, we've submitted several proposals to Washington State's code development proposal process. We just submitted a lot to the city of Denver, who's wanting to advance codes. We're the New York code development process. So a lot of what we do is actually submit these and get comments, questions, modifications, and things like that to make these much more usable before we put them into the IECC. So once they hit the IECC, we really feel that they're ready for prime time. As Eric and Ned photographed it out, so currently it just came out yesterday. There were probably about 560 code change proposals in total that I counted that are roughly split between 50-50 residential and commercial. We submitted about 30 proposals, and this was a joint collaboration between NBI, Northwest Energy Codes Group, which is a NEA-funded effort, a very strong partner of ours, and other collaborators. So it was definitely a collaborative effort to put these in. So the first one we want to talk about is the C406 points option, and this is actually based on analysis the Pacific Northwest National Laboratory performed in Washington State during the last Washington State Commercial Code update, just happened last year. And what they did is they looked at the C406 options packages that are currently in the code, and the analysis showed that there's a disparity in energy savings between the different options. Now, right now in the IECC, we have about 8 different options. They evaluated 5 of the options and found that, for example, reduced infiltration at the very bottom of this graph shows not a lot of savings, but when you start looking at reduced lighting power density, there's a significant amount of savings based on occupancy side, all over roughly about 4%. So the question was how to fix this. And so PNNL developed a technical analysis and the analysis behind developing a points-based option. Advancing here. Sorry, there we go. They basically looked at all of the options and developed a points-based option based on occupancy types. So you're required to get, I believe, 10 points based on your occupancy type, and you can select from multiple efficiency options to do that. So we've got all the climate zones represented. The left-hand column are the different options, and we'll talk about those briefly after this slide. But again, will be based on occupancy types, because some of the provisions don't apply to specific occupancy types. But we feel that this is the fairest way to actually implement the what's currently now the options packages by putting into a points-based approach, and it actually gives jurisdictions the ability to say, you know, maybe we don't want 10 points, maybe we want 15 points or 20 points. So it gives the jurisdiction the ability to actually increase efficiency by requiring more points than what's currently allowed by or required by code. As PNNL developed this, I was looking through here, a lot of the options were reevaluated because there's been issues and problems in the field on some of these. For example, equipment efficiency, the current requirements require both a 10% increase in heating and cooling equipment efficiency, and that hasn't been practical based on some equipment types. So it's been split up to say you can either get points based on increased heating efficiency or increased cooling efficiency. And they also have now increments for 5 and 10% efficiency. So, so you don't have to go the full 10%. Same thing was done on the lighting as far as having a 10% threshold and a 15% threshold for lighting power reduction. There's the option has always been in for digital lighting controls. That's been upgraded and modified. The same as renewables. The threshold's been modified on that a bit. Dedicated outdoor air systems, there's been really no changes on that. The water heating side, there was an option put in for heat pump water heaters, which are becoming more and more prevalent on the market, especially now focused on the decarbonization movement that we're seeing in a lot of jurisdictions. Envelope UA reduction, low envelope leakage, and then something new, kitchen appliances. This is something that was submitted and is actually submitted into Washington State's process, but some recognition that if you install high efficiency kitchen appliances for commercial kitchens, there's a significant amount of savings on that. So there's now going to be an allowance for that. And also controlled receptacles, which is, there's been an attempt to get automatic controlled receptacles into the code for the last couple of code cycles. We have the option of putting it into the points-based option, which is the recommended approach by some of the opponents on here. So, so anyway, that option will be available for C406. Okay, let's go to the next one. The next option is going to be the next requirement, and again, we're only going to be looking at a few of the code change proposals, not all of them, but a mandatory requirement for envelope leakage testing. There's a significant amount of savings on the commercial side if you actually test, and the studies are showing that if you don't test you're not going to be getting the leakage, you're not going to be meeting the leakage rate set by the code. So this particular requirement, very similar to the last proposal that was submitted for the 2018 IECC, would require all buildings other than Group R, which are residential, and Group I, to be leakage tested to meet the 0.4 CFM per square foot requirement. And there are several exceptions, and really it kind of focuses on the smaller buildings. So buildings in several climate zones are completely exempt, 2B, 2C, 3C, and 5C. So you're looking at fairly hot and marine climates are exempted. Buildings less than 5,000 square feet in climate zone 0B, and 0 is actually input into here, even though it's not in the code yet. There's recognition that climate zone 0 will probably be in the code, so that was actually addressed. And then 1, 2A, 4B, and 4C, and then buildings between 5,000 square feet and 50,000 square feet are exempt in zone 0A, 3A, and 5B. And based on studies that were done, it showed that actually kind of an off study on this was that 40% of the buildings constructed without an envelope consultant or anyone to do verification actually didn't come close to meeting the 0.4 CFM per square foot of envelope enclosure leakage rate. So because there is no requirement in the code for an envelope consultant, the best way of knowing that you actually meet the leakage rate is to actually test the buildings. So the analysis was done by PNNL, looking at both savings to investment ratio and also simple payback, which was done by an ASHRAE criteria. And the table at the bottom actually shows the savings to investment ratio, which if you're over 1, you're good, is significantly over 1 for different square footages of different floor areas. And the 22.2 years simple payback is the ASHRAE criteria. So actually having a testing requirement in the code meets a couple of criteria from an economic analysis, and it makes perfect sense. So just to kind of couple onto this, another proposal that was submitted actually is going to be requiring envelope verification if this is into the code. And again, it's the realization that we're probably not getting close to the 0.4 CFM leakage rate. So if you choose the materials and assemblies option in the code, then you need a registered design professional or approved third party to be able to verify that that your building actually complies with the air barrier requirements. And again, this is without testing. So provisions were basically based on some of the ASHRAE language that now requires this in the code. And it requires a review of the construction documents at the very beginning of the process to make sure that the continuous air barrier is reflected in the building plans. It requires on-site inspection to make sure that you actually are installing these products properly and on-site to meet the requirements, and then a final commissioning report to show that you've actually complied with the air barrier requirements. Eric, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you now on a couple of one of your commercial or a couple of your commercial proposals.
Great, thank you. I'll just cover very quickly kind of the concepts behind the IECC's commercial proposals, and you know, our proposals are kind of split half and half between residential and commercial. Our primary aim in our commercial proposals is to try to take the efficiency requirements from ASHRAE that have already been deemed or found to be cost effective and workable, and to try to implement those into the IECC wherever we can without rolling back what's currently in the IECC. And so I'll get to some of those specifics in just a moment, but the broader concept here is that we're trying to take things that have already been worked on and proven and incorporate them into the IECC where it makes sense. We're also, as in the residential code, we're trying to streamline the code language, improve some of the backstops that are already in the code, and incorporate other backstops and other efficient improvements. We're also trying to improve the performance path and the additional efficiency options by about 5%, and we're proposing the addition of a building thermal envelope certificate on the commercial side, similar to what's on the residential side, but a little narrower in scope. So you can move to the next slide if you want, Eric. And as with the residential proposals, I'm going to try and combine a number of commercial proposals into one here. This first one is just actually a part of the fenestration table in the commercial IECC. And again, the green spaces show you U factors, in this case of vertical fenestration and skylights, that we're proposing to improve. And those of you that are involved in the ASHRAE process will recognize that on the fenestration side, I guess on the previous slide, the fenestration U factors are based on, that's all right, they're based on the ASHRAE Addendum AW, and if these U factors are adopted, then ASHRAE 90.1 2019 and the IECC 2021 will have the same U factors for fenestration, which is something that hasn't happened for several years now. So again, we've taken the U factors that ASHRAE approved in Addendum AW and incorporated them into the IECC's prescriptive fenestration table. The slide that's up right now is, again, just a part of the commercial opaque envelope U factor table. We did a similar thing here where we took a look at the ASHRAE U factors, and where ASHRAE had a more efficient U factor, we incorporated it into the IECC table, and then we calculated out an equivalent R value for the R value table. And what this does is it gives us in the IECC the benefit of the efficiency improvements that have taken place in ASHRAE over the last several years without rolling back any of the IECC's current efficiency levels. And so this is just, the roof and wall provisions. We've made improvements all the way across all the categories of the opaque envelope. Those proposals, if you want to look them all up, they run between CE 61 and CE 75, and there are other proponents, envelope proposals mixed in there, but that's generally where they are. But anyway, our proposals are all aimed at trying to get reasonable amount of efficiency improvement and to use the lessons learned in other code setting bodies and in other states, and to try to incorporate those best practices into the 2021 IECC. So Eric, I'll hand it back over to you again.
Great, thank you. Okay, so just in the next few minutes, we'll run through some of the proposals that have impact. They're plugging some holes that are holes in the code that haven't been plugged. The first one is our low power fan efficacy requirement that applies to small exhaust fans in buildings less than 1/12 horsepower, which is a set of fans that aren't covered, that are typically associated with things like bathroom exhaust fans. And so they're covered underneath the residential side, but not on the commercial. So this is basically requiring fan efficacies based on Energy Star version 4.0, and there's a sister proposal to this that's also going into the residential provisions of the code, just to make sure that there's consistency between occupancy types. And from a first cost impact, there's a lot of fans already on the market right now that meet this. So the actual cost ranges from no cost whatsoever up to first cost increase of about a 6-year payback. And again, this is based on fan quality, which is from a noise standpoint, finish standpoint, and things like that. So it's a wide range of fans that'll meet this particular requirement. High efficacy lighting, we're also looking at updating this on both residential and commercial. On the commercial side, actually on both sides, we're looking at increasing the lighting efficacy to 65 lumens per watt per lamp, and then with the recognition that luminaires, which are basically fixtures with integrated LED lights, have had a difficult time complying with code. So putting a threshold in there for 45 lumens per watt, and having a new method of complying with that is something that's going to be an option in here too. So you'll have a couple of different ways of looking at this. A lot of the luminaires on the market include, again, integrated fixtures with LEDs that may not be able to meet the higher lumen per watt just for lamp. So the next requirement that we're putting in here let's see, is actually a new lighting power allowance, interior lighting power allowance table. We're at, there's a realization that technology for LED lighting is getting significantly more and more efficient, and this is being reflected in what's coming out of ASHRAE right now and other states that are taking a look at this, ASHRAE 189. So we are actually proposing to reduce the lighting power density requirements for whole buildings and using the step-by-step approach. The whole building approach, I did a quick analysis before in the preparation for this the webinar, and it's roughly about an 8 to 33% decrease in lighting power density based on occupancy types. And again, these values came out of ASHRAE 189.1 that were used as a basis for the New York stretch code, and also it had input from lighting designers in the New York area. So we feel comfortable that you can meet these values. You can meet these values in the design side without too much trouble. I know there are other proposals coming out with similar values that are. I have it in the monograph right now too. So there will be a few of these that are going to be submitted as we move forward. So the next proposal will, the next set of proposals are actually we're calling our Ready and Resilient. It's basically to ready the market for renewables, and actually ready the market for renewables in what we consider a responsible manner to make sure that we support the installation of renewables. We just want them to be done in a responsible manner, and this is kind of a key thing. And to make sure that we're focused on efficiency first in buildings and then adding renewables on versus actually taking an older building and just putting a bunch of renewables on and calling it good. So our first proposal is actually based on an ASHRAE addendum BY, come to 90.1 2016, but this would actually require renewables, about 2.5 watts per square foot of renewables, times the gross conditioned floor area for the 3 largest floors. And there are several exceptions, and really the exceptions focus on if there's not enough solar that will strike the roof, for example, to make it viable. The exceptions focus on that, and it also focuses on if you don't have enough roof space. So let's say your roof is you've got skylights, you have heating and cooling equipment, roof curbs and things like that, that actually make it so that you can't install the renewables on that roof. Then there'll be an exemption on that too. So some very practical exemptions for this, but this really just starts to get renewables integrated into commercial buildings where I think we all pretty much know this is the direction we're going to be heading right now. So the key is to start the process now with a small amount of renewable, and then as we start moving more and more toward net zero, then the renewable will increase. The other option, the other set of code proposals that we're putting in, we're actually trying to kind of correcting and modifying the definitions that we're using for renewables right now to make sure, trying to align these between the IECC and the ASHRAE process. So looking at biomass gas, and on-site renewable definitions, just to make sure there's consistency in the industry. So the IECC isn't having one set of requirements and ASHRAE having another set of requirements. So where the game plan is to align the definitions as much as we possibly can in the process. Last but not least, Eric had talked about an EV charging station requirement for residential. We work with industry on the commercial side and residential too, with Southwest Energy Efficiency Project and a group of national members there to basically have a very similar requirement to require both the commercial buildings have a minimum number of EV ready spaces and also a minimum number of EV capable spaces based on the number of parking spaces for the building. So if you don't have a parking space for your commercial building, let's say it's street front and there's no parking, then you don't have to worry about this. But if you do have a parking lot, then you would be required. But really, when you start looking at the number of EV-ready spaces, you're only looking at a maximum of 2 spaces. There was a lot of work done to look at national or state level and jurisdictional level EV charging station requirements right now to try to kind of come up with a consensus requirement that we felt comfortable enough moving forward. So we're not requiring every space to be EV ready or capable, but enough spaces to get things going, because with the recognition that electric vehicles are becoming more and more prevalent, and it's easier to do it in new construction than it is to try to retrofit an existing building. So this will only be applied to new buildings. The definition that we're using in EV capable and EV ready, basically for EV capable is having enough support in your panel for a 208, 240 volt branch circuit to each parking space, and then the installation of raceways, but not running the wiring. Whereas EV ready would actually have enough space in your panel and also running the conduit and the wiring to a junction box, for example, a receptacle, something like that you can actually then go ahead and install the finishing pieces on that to actually make it an EV ready space. So, and again, as Eric said, there are a few of these in the code. There was an attempt at collaboration between the different members, and I suspect there'll be more collaboration as we get closer to the hearings to try to come up with consensus. With that, we have all of our code change proposals out on our website, so definitely feel free to go out to the NBI newbuildings.org code/policy, but all of the code change proposals, a brief description of each one of them are out there. We would definitely like your input, definitely like your comments. Please feel free to reach out to me. If you have any questions, comments, I'd love to hear from you, especially before the hearings. So any information, anything you'd like to discuss on this, I am available at any time to talk about that. So, and with that, I will turn this over to Connie.
All right. The first question we have is about existing buildings. What proposals do you think will most affect the existing building section of the IECC, and how?
We have two, during the development of Chapter 5 of the existing building section, there were some areas that were missed, some disconnects. And I know from our standpoint, like the fact that mechanical commissioning is not a requirement when you get into existing buildings. It seems to be silent on that. So we have two proposals in, one for additions and one for alterations that would actually require, based on system size obviously, but we require mechanical commissioning and also lighting control commissioning or lighting control verification through the existing building side. So I believe that will certainly have an impact on that. At least we'll get better systems in. I unfortunately have not reviewed the monographs, so I know that there is, I'm not sure what other proposals. I know that the SEPCAT committee has also submitted a proposal to modify the existing building language to help clean it up and make it more usable. I know there are, on the residential side, there is a couple of proposals to clean up the language for clean up the language for the ability to say if your building with the addition uses no more energy than the building with the existing building, you comply. But it was vague language, and there was actually now some guidance in there. So I know there's a few proposals like that on the existing building side that'll at least clean up and try to get better compliance. Eric, I'm not sure on your side what you're seeing.
Yeah, I have not had a chance to review all the proposals in detail. I did notice there were some that dealt with change in occupancy. As for the EECC's proposals, anytime you improve the prescriptive tables, there's kind of a chain reaction throughout the code. Improving the prescriptive table not only improves all the compliance paths in the new buildings portion of the code, but it can also improve the provisions that apply in additions and alterations to existing buildings. So a good example of that is when you improve the fenestration U factors, as we're proposing in the code chapter that applies to new buildings. When windows are replaced in an existing building, they look back to that same prescriptive table for the requirements for replacement fenestration. So while it may not be obvious when you're looking at the proposals, a lot of those same proposals that improve efficiency for existing or for new buildings will also apply to renovations in existing buildings.
And I just want to add, I believe there's a proposal by SEPCAC based on a Rutgers proposal from 2018 that will require buildings through a change in occupancy to comply with the code, which will have a major impact if that one passes. So I believe that will submit it. So.
Okay, I have another question. Given the urgency of recent reports on the increasing pace of climate change, do you think that the IECC is on a path to net zero by 2050, and can that be done quicker?
Well, I can take a shot at answering this one. One of the reasons why we put forward the FlexPoints proposal is that it puts the power back in the hands of individual jurisdictions to very easily scale up that improvement to meet their needs. We've seen in the last few years that cities and some states have taken the lead in terms of meeting climate goals. And oftentimes we've heard back from city managers and staff from governor's offices that they want to get to net zero, they want to improve the efficiency of their buildings, they just don't know where to start, and they don't want to have to start from scratch with the code. And so the idea behind FlexPoints is that this is a mechanism that's ready to go, that can be kind of scaled up to meet whatever your jurisdiction's needs are. And so I'll leave it there, and I don't know if Bill or Eric Macula want to comment on that too.
Yeah, and I'll just, oh, go ahead, Bill.
Well, no, it's Bill Fay. I just wanted to point out that one of the reasons that the U.S. Conference of Mayors addressed the IECC Board of Directors last fall was to talk about this, because they've been international leaders on climate, mayors, and in addition to that have been strong proponents of building energy efficiency, and they see the link and they see the value, and they know that McKinsey was right when it said it was the most cost-effective way to meet their climate goals by 2030 was more efficient buildings. So there's a tremendous amount of interest in doing that, and I think that the scalability behind both, all of our FlexPoints proposals, I think is really important for cities that are going to do better. And not all of them can, but they can certainly work with their states to go beyond that. We have 21 states I know that are members of the Climate Alliance and have committed their states to meeting the Paris Accord targets. And those governors are very interested in finding ways to do better than just getting there by 2050. We felt that if the IECC reached net zero construction by 2050 and had that scalability to it, that a jurisdiction could go beyond that and find their own pace.
And I'll just echo what Bill and Eric had said. Actually, from a new building standpoint, we are very aggressively going after savings. We set our goals for this code cycle to 10 to 15% increased efficiency on the commercial side and 10% on the residential side, and also trying to set the provisions in the code and set the market for, like I said, being able to use renewables in a responsible way to integrate those best in with from a building energy efficiency standpoint. So we believe that we will need to continue to push hard on the codes every code cycle to get there. And I think you'll see new advances coming out as new opportunities come up with the jurisdictions that will be passed on to the national level. But we will need to continue to push hard to be able to get there from an energy code standpoint.
And then, of course, the magical part about all of this is that while a lot of climate reduction plans cost a lot of money, this actually, building energy efficiency takes money that you would normally be paying to a utility. And we all know that as home owners and tenants and commercial building tenants, we don't have a lot of leverage with our utility to negotiate the rates. But as we occupy more efficient buildings, we can reduce our energy bills. And the bills literally, by the most recent codes lately, are adding tens of thousands of dollars to the wallets of families, businesses, and others through the 100 years that building is going to stand. And I think that this actually makes just a wonderful solution that not only reduces carbon emissions, but at the same time puts money in the wallets of people that they need and they can use for their own college funds or business investments or other things along those lines.
Great. Well, we've hit the 11 o'clock Pacific time frame here, so we're going to go ahead and close out this webinar. Thank you so much, Bill, and both the Erics and Amy for this session. Don't forget there's a survey to answer at the end here as you close out, and anybody who asked questions that we did not get to, we'll take those and respond to you individually. Thanks so much. Have a great day.